Hello and welcome to your full moon video for the full moon of the 2nd of July 2015. And we're also going to take a little bit of a look further ahead at some of the aspects that are connected with this full moon that are obviously influencing the energy of this full moon as well. But let's start with the full moon in general, which will take place in Purva Ashadha and the sign of Capricorn. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about what Purva Ashadha is all about. I've spoken about this many times in previous videos, but obviously you may not have seen those previous videos, so why don't we touch on it here? Purva Ashadha I like to define as being connected to the causal nature of the soul. Now, what might I mean by that? What I mean is the soul in its natural state, in its purity, without all the interference of the mind, which tends to bog us down in the shoulds, the woulds, and the coulds of life. The things that we feel that we should do, the things that we feel that we would do if only things were a certain way, only they're not. The things that we could do if we only had a little bit of this and a little bit of that, only we don't. So Purva Ashadha is the soul in its natural state, with all the resources and with all of the abundance that it needs naturally at its disposal. The only problem is sometimes that doesn't feel like what we absolutely want. And that's where we kind of come to a crux this week. But again, we're talking about the full moon first. And with the energy of the full moon, there is a recognition of a need to be true to oneself. But I'm going to take that one step further, because quite often the truth and the process of holding true to ourselves is something that is evolving over time, because we change, we evolve in our heart. Things that we held to be values at one point in our life no longer tend to hold water at another point. And that's also connected with the process of Purva Ashadha too. Each of these nakshatras or lunar mansions is connected with a particular symbol, or actually several different symbols. And with Purva Ashadha, the symbol for Purva Ashadha is a winnowing basket. Now that used to be used for gathering grain and taking the grain and shaking it back and forth in order to separate the wheat from the chaff, to separate the nutritious part of the grain from the part of the grain that was indigestible, right? To get rid of the superficial and leave the real, what is real, be in its wake, so to speak. So that's a very deep process. And so sometimes we discover that something doesn't hold true in our life, that it doesn't really speak the truth of our heart, or it's not connected to our soul. And we go through a process of letting it go. But sometimes that process can be a little bit difficult. And you may find over the course of this week that there is a certain amount of grieving the past that you have to go through. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, grieving really on a certain level is a celebration. It's celebrating something that has been in our lives, but recognizing that it can be there no more. And sometimes we have to go through the process of letting it go so that we can more powerfully move on and be in a stronger position for the future and more connected to ourselves and more true to ourselves. Now, on the same day as the full moon, and actually in days following, we've got Mercury forming 3 harmonious alignments. Mercury is very active after its recent retrograde phase, and it's now moving forward. And it's in the nakshatra of Mrigashira. And over the course of a few days, from the 2nd to the 5th of July, Mercury is going to make a harmonious alignment first to Uranus, then to Jupiter, and afterwards to Venus. Now, Mercury in Mrigashira, let's take a look at what Mrigashira is about. Mrigashira is associated with the seeking of fulfillment, but quite often what happens with the processes with which Mrigashira is associated is a separation of different components which create a situation so that we can identify what's there that's good and what's there that's bad, and rejoin those components in a different way to make a change and to make a difference. Now, first on the 2nd of July, at the same time that we're having the full moon, Mercury will form a harmonious alignment with Uranus in Revati. Now, Revati marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of the other, or I should say the in-between phase between two different cycles, where preparations are taking place for the next phase. And Uranus will be presenting a balancing out factor, but Uranus is a very creative planet and a very revolutionary planet. So it's like, imagine you have a mechanic and he's kind of fiddling around under the bonnet or hood of your car, dependent upon whether you live in the UK or in the US. And he's going through that process, and he's taking things which you might think that you need, right? But he's just kind of recognizing that they're not needed and pulling them out and kind of chunking them to the left and to the right. And you're going, wow, what's really going on here? Do I need that? Do I not need that? And that can be a very disconcerting process, right? But in order to move forward, you're needing to go through a very powerful purification right now. And this is actually something that's working in your favor rather than against you. On the 4th of July, Mercury, still in Mrigashira, forms a harmonious alignment with Jupiter over in Leo in the nakshatra of Magha. Now, where Magha is concerned, Magha gives the power to leave the body. So quite often, the associations with Magha are connected with the need to put aside any of the challenging feelings that we have inside of ourselves and to just get on with things. In terms of the grieving process, it's the need to recognize that we need to move on, even though we might be feeling a pining or longing for those things that are associated with the past. But in order to move forward in a more powerful and positive manner, there's a need to go through that particular process. Otherwise, we'll just stay stuck in one particular modality. And as we both know, that's not helpful. Then on the 5th, we've got Mercury forming the same harmonious alignment with Venus, also in Leo and in Magha, but in a different section of that particular nakshatra. So with this evolution of the process, there is a devotion to a new way forward and a connection with one's power and strength and recognizing what's wise. Venus, in terms of the planets, represents the royal minister, the advisor to the king and the queen. Sometimes they hold a difference of opinion. Well, in this particular instance, Venus is making you recognize that you just kind of have to stay connected to your evolving set of values, which stand the potential to carry you out of a difficult phase of your life and give you the true potential to start a new phase of your existence. Then on the 6th of July, and I should say this has been going on behind the scenes prior to, or I should say while all these other things are going on. It just becomes exact on this date. The very powerful aspect behind the scenes is an opposition between the Sun and Pluto. It's interesting because we can look at the Sun as the light giver, and Pluto sometimes represents the darkness. In terms of existence, both of those forces are absolutely necessary. And with Sun opposing Pluto aspects, what tends to happen is a very powerful revelation. Something surfaces that we didn't see before. Something is revealed to us. If we're hiding from an aspect of ourselves, that's the moment that that truth is going to be shown to us. If we're hiding something from somebody else, which I don't recommend doing, then that's the moment that that is going to come to the surface, right? So the Sun is in Punarvasu. Punarvasu gives the space for energy to gather together, for strength to come together in order to move forward. Pluto in Purva Ashadha is going to confront you with those sides of your ego that feel devoted to something from the past, which is no longer helpful for your existence and which no longer serves you. But in terms of having the strength to move forward, you're going to feel almost like you're going down to the bottom in a particular situation. I know that sounds frightening, but you need to look at it in a rather evolutionary manner rather than in a manner that's just connected to pure feelings, because you're heading in a direction that's much better. But in order to head in that direction, you need to let go of something from the past, even though it may be a difficult process. Sometimes the difficult process that's there in a moment is something that gets better within a day or two. And there is the potential for that to happen. So please, no feelings of sadness as you need to move on from something, right? The truth which was you in the past is no longer you in the present. And that's a good recognition, and that's a powerful, and that's a positive revelation to recognize. There is also a tense alignment going on that very same day between the Sun and Saturn. This is called a sesquiquadrate. The Sun, as we mentioned, in Punarvasu. Saturn is in Anuradha, which is about devotion. And with this particular style of devotion, a la Saturn style, I should say, there is stuck energy, being stuck in a deep devotion that you have to something or to someone, when you know inside yourself that it's time to move on and it's time for that process to shift. But it's the letting go that's the difficult bit. But remember, we have those planets in Maga and harmonious alignments from Mercury to those particular planets. And that gives you the strength to go through the process and to be strong. And Mercury, while this is happening, is in Gemini, where Mercury is very strong. Then on the 8th, we've got Mercury again, right? This time forming a tense alignment with Saturn. Saturn's still in the same space in Anuradha. Saturn doesn't move very much, so it's going to be staying there. Mercury, though, is in Ardra, where focus intensifies, where the mind becomes passionate. And the mind is likely to become very passionate about new ideas, new ideals, and seeing them in a different light and offering you many different ways to move forward with the process. There can be a slight amount of tension as Saturn's wanting to stay stuck, saying stuck in the same space that it was before. Well, there needs to be a moving on. Mars is assisting with that process. Mars also newly arriving in Punarvasu. Even though Mars is debilitated in Cancer, which is where Punarvasu is, Mars is forming a harmonious alignment with Neptune. Things change form. Neptune can be, if you know your Vedic mythology, Neptune can be associated with Vishnu. And if you read stories about Vishnu, Vishnu took all these different forms, had several different incarnations, but through them all, it was Vishnu, right? So those things that inspire you are always in your heart. And you're going to need to take a look at the things that inspire you most, and you'll likely identify an essence that's beneath all of those particular things. And there can be a recognition that dawns that on one level, those things that you feared you were letting go of are not really being relinquished at all. Things are just changing shape. Things are changing form. And there's a need to cut right through that haze, and that's what Mars can help us with. But Mars in Cancer can sometimes become overwhelmed, right? So if you feel overwhelmed towards around the 8th of July, just take a look deeper beneath the surface at whatever might be creating the issue for you, and see how you can plan an ideal way to move forward with your particular situation. So what it's all boiling down to this week is allowing yourself to evolve. Recognize that, what might have been appropriate, I should say, for one phase of your existence, well, that might be changing. And you might feel like you're letting go of something or having to say goodbye to something that was very valuable to you. But are you really doing that? Or is the situation just changing? Is it shaping up in a different direction? Now, this could be related to any particular aspect of your life. In order to know more about that, I'd need to take a look at your personal birth chart. I do offer a vast range of astrological services, which are available through the link that is in the lower left-hand corner of this video. There's also a link further down in the description area of this YouTube page. For those of you interested in learning Vedic astrology in general, and especially the nakshatras, I have two different things in the works. We're going to be starting a Vedic astrology webinar course, which you can join in on. And you can look for information to be released on that within the next couple of days. I'm going to try to get it up tonight, but it might be up tomorrow. So if you see it in this YouTube video, you'll know that it's ready, and because I'll put it in this YouTube video at the time that happens. Also, I'm working on a nakshatra course with fellow astrologer Ryan Korzak. You can look for that to be released later on in the autumn. That's going to do it for your new moon, I should say full moon, video forecast for the full moon in Purva Ashadha and in Capricorn. Until next time we speak, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.